Hi, everyone. This is Dee Marley with the History Bards podcast. I just cannot tell everyone how thrilled I am to have Elizabeth St. John on the show today. Elizabeth's book, The Godmother's Secret, won the best book of the year for the Historical Fiction Company the year before last. And I cannot believe it's been this long and we haven't had a chance to sit down and talk. We're so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I am so thrilled to be here, and I can't believe it's been that long either. We've emailed, we've chatted, we've done so on. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
So very glad. And we see the award in the background. Everybody taking note
Absolutely.
of that.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. The book, the award.
So we have to tell everybody. Yeah, we have to tell everybody a little bit about you. Your books, in your bio, it says that you write about the extraordinary women whose intriguing kinship with England's kings and queens brings an intimately unique perspective to medieval, Tudor, and Stuart times. Now, we know that a lot of people are so fascinated with those time periods in English history, but I think you have like just a special connection, and I think that really came through in your book, The Godmother's Secret. So can you tell us a little bit more about your connection and the history behind your family?
Yes, I'd love to. So I think in a way we sort of have a front row seat to what was going on in politics and society from medieval times all the way through actually to World War II. The St. John, as we say it in England, the St. John family have long been landowners and then aristocrats in society in England, and every so often made a very advantageous marriage and sort of became very close to the king of the time or the queen of the time. So we've had royal connections. We stem from a shared grandmother with the Tudors, Margaret Beauchamp. So from that way, our family managed to find its way into all kinds of sticky situations and all kinds of intrigue and betrayal. And because the St. John family is so well documented, because we have extraordinary archives within the family, I was able to research those and just find these extraordinary stories.
I think that's so fascinating. And, you know, for a lot of people who like to do ancestry research, and sometimes it's very difficult. So that's just amazing that you were able to, that's been carried through, that you've been able to have all of that access to the research. So
it's not to say it's not difficult. I mean, the first of all, how do you spell our name and how do you pronounce it? And you know, it's pronounced St. John, but it's spelled St. John. But then they spelt it various ways throughout the centuries. So you have to look for Saint spell out in full, or the French pronunciation of Saint Jean, so it's Sinjun. So it's a genealogy nightmare, but we love it.
Yes, I'm sure. Yes. And you know, that I think that happens a lot throughout history about names changing like that. I know with my own like maiden name that happened. But it was a Scottish name, and I think before that was Norman. So you know, it developed, and now here in the United States, it's completely different. And
exactly.
So it is a nightmare sometimes whenever you're trying to do those ancestry research.
But it's a joy. And you know what I always say to my readers or friends or people who come to the Lydiard archives, every family's got a story. I mean, it's really interesting. On my father's side, the St. John family, my direct family tree goes back to the year 700 and something. I mean, It's extraordinary. And it's a beautiful family tree, and I love to do the research.
Yeah.
My mother's mother was an orphan in Ireland during the famine, and we don't even know who her family was. She was adopted by Carmelite nuns. But there's a story there as well.
There's a story there too, yeah.
So, I always encourage people to look for the stories, because it's fun finding the dates and the places, but just those hints of a story behind are what's so extraordinary.
Yeah. So which leads us into, for those of you, I'm sure there's tons of people out there that have already read The Godmother's Secret, but I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about the story, because it's so remarkable, and the writing is just brilliant. And that's the reason why you won the award.
Oh,
and and but the story behind it and how you were able, because just, to preface it, a lot of people know the story of the princes in the tower and the connection to Richard III. There's a lot of controversy there. There's a lot of speculation and even recent stuff that has come out about the princes in the tower. So tell us about your connection and your ancestress that was part of that.
I'd love to. First of all, I had no idea what I was getting into when I embarked on it. Because I'd primarily been writing in the 17th century.
Yes.
So yes, I knew of the princes in the tower and so on. And we all did growing up. I mean, it's history's biggest unsolved mystery.
Yes.
Truly, after I'd finished writing the Lydiard Chronicles, which was my trilogy set in the 17th century, I thought, what am I going to do next? And back to the family tree. And our tree is digitized. Mm-hmm. So one afternoon I was literally playing around with the tree and I put my own name in, as one does, thinking, oh, I wonder who else is in there that's got my name, Elizabeth St. John. And, there was a Victorian one, there was a Stuart one, there was a couple of Tudors that looked really interesting. And then suddenly this woman came up from the 15th century. And I went, oh, I don't really know much about the medieval family. Let me look a little further. So I looked a little further and saw that she was alive in the 1470s, 1480s. I thought that was an interesting time period.
Right.
And then I looked a little further and I saw that she was the half-sister to Margaret Beaufort, which meant that she was the aunt to Henry VII. And I'm going, oh, this is interesting. She must have been right in the middle of everything. And Margaret Beaufort herself is quite a controversial figure.
Yes, she is.
So I dug a little deeper. I went, oh, it's interesting stuff. And then I discovered that she was the godmother to Edward V, the oldest prince in the tower. And I went, wow. Yeah. So she was a Lancastrian, godmother to a Plantagenet with a Tudor as a nephew. I'm going, this woman was right in the middle of everything that was going on. I've got a story. So I have a story there. And then as I started to research even more, I really understood that a godmother in medieval times was considered a blood relative.
Yes.
It wasn't like today where, it's an honorary sort of thing and maybe you share a beer at the christening. I mean, this was a blood relative. I mean, so much so that you had to get permission from the Pope if you were going to marry her into the family. So that meant to me that she had a much deeper relationship with the young prince than perhaps we'd think of. Yeah. She was in sanctuary with the Queen, delivering the prince. She was there at the christening. So I thought, this is a woman who's going to witness some extraordinary events.
Yes.
And then I put my writer's hat on. I'm sorry, my cat's probably going to make a star
appearance. That's okay. We love that.
As they do. Yes, there was his tail. Okay. And then I thought, okay, but from a writer's standpoint, what am I going to do here? And then I thought, I could pretty much tell her story. We don't know what happened to the princes in the tower. And as I started doing, as I always do, research that is based on contemporary accounts, not rewrites, not future interpretations. There is no evidence that they were murdered. They just disappeared.
Yeah.
So then I had a story, because then I felt I could then wrap my godmother's story, Elizabeth's story, around all of those events and write an ending that I felt was plausible, but still part of the sort of family history. And we have some extraordinary history within the family that directly correlates to my book, which was really exciting.
Well, tell us, like maybe you have like one.
Once you get me started here, I'm so sorry. I'll just keep going.
No, we love that. I would love like maybe one thing that just really stood out to you that helped you along your path of writing about it.
Yeah. So I think what happened when I started looking at the family ties. So we had Margaret Beaufort, who, was an extraordinary woman, very bright, ambitious for her son, but she also had a very gentle side to her. She was very pious. Mm-hmm. She took care of everyone in her family. She took care of all her St. John relatives with great care. So she's not this sort of black and white dragon woman that so often she's portrayed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, there's Margaret doing her thing. And then I had to look around Elizabeth for her relatives and for what was going on, because as you know, in the 15th century, women didn't have much agency.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of records, but there were records of her brother and there were records of her husband. So as I started to piece those together, there were like signposts that were leading to her life story. And then even more interesting, signposts that led to potentially what happened to the princes. Because all the way through, when they were in the Tower that summer of 1483, my family, Margaret, her and Elizabeth's husband, their half-brother John Wells, were all around the Tower, either trying to get them out of the Tower or raising a rebellion against Richard or doing all these other things. So I kind of call it, you know, the black hole of history. There's something going on in the middle. There's this magnetic force of things happening around it. And fortunately, because we don't know what happened to them, I was able to then put my fiction hat on and go, what would I like to write this as?
Right. And honestly, this was one of those stories that whenever I got finished reading it, I just closed the cover, sat there for a moment and said, this is what happened. It really did make you feel that way, that it felt so authentic. It felt so, even though of course you add the fiction part in, but it felt so authentic, like you could actually visualize this is exactly what happened. This is what happened to them. And
Thank you.
I think that's what came across as so brilliant about your book.
I appreciate that. Well, I think, you know, as historians, we are, I mean, it's our responsibility to present a fair and balanced telling of history. We don't want to be, you know, one side or the other. We try to walk that middle ground and use evidence and history and contemporary documents to support our telling of it. If we are going to, you know, change things or alter things for the sake of fiction, then do that and put it in the author notes. I mean, we're writing historical fiction, we're not writing nonfiction. So have fun with it.
Have fun.
But, you know, I love the fact that you felt it was plausible at the end, because that's what I wanted to feel. Like you've been presented with something that maybe you'll go and do some more research. Maybe think of, maybe there's two sides to this story rather than being firmly in one camp or the other. You know, it's this.
And I kind of understand that because, you know, my books are Shakespearean, and my first book was about the possibility that Shakespeare did not write the plays, and the research that had to go into that, and the possibilities there by just doing research about the sonnets themselves, which tell the story of somebody
absolutely
was the writer. So taking that and trying to make it plausible to people, it's sometimes very controversial, and like with
it is controversial.
Yeah.
But I think if it's evidence-based, Dee, I think if we can say, I have researched, you know, the letters from the Spanish ambassador during that summer. I have looked at first folios and said, okay, you know, why are there differences in every edition? You know, there's ways that we can do our research and present a compelling story without twisting the facts.
I agree. I totally agree. And that's really good advice for like others who want to delve into historical fiction, especially younger writers who are starting out and maybe think, I want to write historical fiction. So I think that's a really good showing the balance that you have to have.
You do. And I think, you know, knowing that your readers are from all around the world, knowing that they've perhaps only read a certain author or been schooled a certain ways, I think it's always up to us to open those windows to history and encourage people to read all different kinds of versions. You know, when we do our research, yes, I read other novels, I read biographies, I read academic papers, I read, you know, true documents. And then you throw it all away, right? Because you don't want to use any of that in your book. You want it to sink into your psyche so you can write with that knowledge, but not preach it. So it's a very interesting phenomenon we go through.
It really is. It really is. So I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about Lydiard Park. Because I know that it says that you're the international ambassador for the Friends of Lydiard Park. So please tell us a little bit about that.
It's my special place. It's my
Yes.
very, very special place. So Lydiard Park is in England. It's in the county of Wiltshire. So it's about an hour and a half's drive, train ride west of London. And it's our family seat, as they call it in England. There's a beautiful country house there. It's open to the public. There's a museum there. And it's been in our family. It was in our family. I'll tell you that story in a second. Since the 1400s. And in fact, it was Margaret Beaufort that actually, or Margaret Beecham, who actually gave the Lydiard Park to Oliver St. John back in 1480. So it's been in our family since then. They think actually it was originally, there was a Roman villa there. So there's been people living there for many years. But through the years, then it was first the Baronet St. John, then it was the Earls, and then we made it to Viscount, which was pretty exciting. and then the Viscount, first Viscount Frederick, lost it all on women and horses and gambling. So the family fortunes took a big dive.
Right.
And gradually, as they did, the land was sold off. Now it's just down to about 200 acres. Of exquisite parkland, and the house, and an incredible Grade 1 listed church that's the St. John family church, where we have extraordinary monuments and tombs and so on as part of it. But the house itself was almost lost. In 1942, the last lord of the manor had to give it up. It was turned into a hospital during the war. And in fact, it was one of the hospitals that was built for the D-Day in 1944. They put a whole field hospital in there. We think the 101st Airborne Division was stationed there during the war. So it became this sort of American and POW camp. House turned into almost ruin. And then very, very fortunately, the local council, Swindon Borough Council, bought the house for £10,000 and saved it. And we've been restoring it ever since. And now it is a glorious memorial to centuries of English country life, but also the people of the parish, also the farmers, the people who served in the house, the people who took care of the gardens and so on. So we've created this extraordinary microcosm of English history at Lydiard. So it's a very special place to me.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So it's definitely something to put on everybody's bucket list to visit. I know a lot of people are like focused on visiting the house that was filmed for Downton Abbey, but I think Lydiard Park would be like definitely a place to go.
Well, it's not a grand house. It's beautiful. I mean, it's this gorgeous Palladian fronted. It's got a Palladian front and a medieval back, because the particular lord who did the remodel with the Palladian front ran out of money on women and horses and gambling, so he couldn't finish his remodel. So it's got this wonderful dichotomy of a funny front and back, but it's charming, and it's got an extraordinary paintings, and
oh, that sounds wonderful.
And it's got I love it. It's got a walled garden that we recreated from the original 18th century walled garden. So it's all, so anyway, another thing I could talk about for years.
Yes, and we can all tell that is definitely your special place. And so for, that comes through, and it's so, like, do you get a chance to visit often?
Oh yeah. I'm back 3 or 4 times a year, which is really wonderful. And then the Lydiard Archives is our digital archive, and it's free and open to everyone, because we feel that it's important to share all that social history. So if anybody wants to go and see Lydiard digitally, they can go on the lydiardarchives.org.uk.
Okay, we'll definitely put that link on this as well, so people can know where to go and find that. So as far as you, so what's up for you? What are you working on, anything, or do you have any events planned that we should know about?
Well, funny you should say that. So, you know, when you sort of finish a book, it doesn't quite ever leave you.
Yes.
And you have a story that sort of ends in a mystery and you're not quite sure what happened to it. So in 1674, they dug up the bones of the princes in the tower. They think.
Yeah.
They think. And there are bones interred in this beautiful white Christopher Wren designed urn in Westminster Abbey with a very powerful inscription from Charles II, who was on the throne at the time, saying, "Here lie the bones of the princes, you know, murdered by Richard, to all extents and purposes." And I went, "Oh, no, they don't." So my current novel, which I'm editing right now, which will be released in the fall, is a 4-year time period of another ancestress, Mistress Apsley, Franny Apsley, who's actually from the Lydiard Chronicles. She was at court at the time. She was the closest companion to Mary, who became the future queen. Her father was the treasurer to King James. And it's all about Franny and her quest to find out whose bones they were that they dug up.
Oh my goodness, I just got chilled.
And what impact that might have on her own family, but more importantly, what impact that might have on the country and the king. So it's that's underway right now.
Oh, that's fat. Well, we cannot wait. We cannot wait for that. And I'm sure I'm among like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who feel the same way about your books. They're remarkable. They're very, very, you know, you can always tell when an author's passion comes through, and your books definitely do that. And we really do appreciate you being here on the show today. And thank you for sharing all of that wonderful history. Can you tell the listeners like where they can go to find you, like your website?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So my website is Elizabeth J. St. John, all one word, .com. And then I'm on Amazon, my bio page. And then, of course, at Lydiard as well. You can find me there anytime.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely.
I'm on social media. My email's on my website. I love to hear from readers and talk to them. So just find me wherever you can. I'm out there.
Okay. We'll definitely put all those links up on the whenever we post this next week, and we'll send this link to you whenever it's ready. And again, we're excited for your new book, and I just can't, I can't say enough about it. It's just, it's a remarkable book, and I'm wanting everybody to go out and get it today if you have not already read it.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you. And I'd love to hear from any readers who have questions or would like to comment. It's always a joy to hear from and talk about that. And thank you so much for having me. Good luck with your books too. And
thank you very much.
History Bards. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. And to all of our listeners out there, again, this is Dee Marley at the History Bards podcast. And don't forget, keep making history and keep listening.